Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome today to this event on Anything But Steady, a book that's recently written by Ofrit Liviatan, and hopefully I've pronounced that properly. And greetings, I'm in Liverpool in my chaotic office because I'm trying to get ready for a field trip tomorrow, so I apologize for the mess, but I'm here anyway. My name is Pete Shirlow, and we have our author with us as well, and who is in America. So I don't know where everybody else is from, but we do have a spread of people here. And of course, very much I would like to thank Alan, who's here today, who's doing all the technical stuff, which is well beyond my ability. Not that I have much ability, but it's certainly beyond that ability. And also to Peter O'Neill and the others. So I believe this year the festival has had 198 events and now has 50 partners. So I'm sure success is breeding all sorts of problems that come with that. But nonetheless, it's really important. And thank you to all of you today who have turned up. I know some of you in different time zones, and it's a nice sunny day in Liverpool. I don't know what it's like in Belfast, but you're here anyway. And I think our author and friend Ofrit will be very delighted that you've made it here today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to get some answers. And then we will open it up. And the way we're going to do that is if anything pops into your head, would you be kind enough to put it in the chat and I'll pick those up. So hello, Ofrit, and thank you very much for inviting me to chair your talk today. But there's sorry, yep, where you go, yep.
No, I just want to say a very good day to you, Professor Shirlow. It's not only a genuine treat, but a tremendous honor to share this opportunity with you, because so much of my sense making of Northern Ireland owes to your scholarship. But I do want to say, in case people in the audience aren't in the know, that you're not only the authority on conflict transformation, but perform constructive intergroup relations as part of your personal marriage as well. You have married a dairy girl before it was popular, right? Can you share a little bit about that? And before the peace too.
Well, yes, I met my now wife in the 1980s. We were at university, who is from a very different background from mine. I'm from a Protestant Unionist background in Lisburn, and my wife Una is from Derry, from a nationalist Irish background. And of course, when you marry someone from Derry, you don't marry one person, you marry about 40. And of course, that was very peculiar in those days. We've done some research recently in which, of course, it's very hard to measure marriage now, because people don't get married in the way that they once did. And but in my generation, I know I look younger, people close to 60. So in the 50s to 65 generation, it's around about 8% of people who are in a relationship across the sectarian divide. And the data we had recently shows that it's now close to a quarter. So that's a tremendous change. And I suppose it's the same thing as we experienced in terms of bringing two kids up within that culturally different sort of world. And of course, I think what that is like much else, diversity breeds knowledge and breadth. And we have two lovely children who are neither homophobic, racist, sectarian, or any of those things. And I think that the part of it does come out of having that hybrid mixed background. But we're here to talk about you, not about me. And of course, one of the things that's interesting is you're a renowned political scientist. But why would a political scientist? Because we have so many pressures being academics, write, publish. And then you come along and you write a novel. So I'd be very interested in why that was the case. Why have you moved into this other way of expressing your ideas and beliefs?
Okay, so I'll answer your question, but before I do that, I want to join your thanks to Peter O'Neill, to Alan, who's behind the scenes today, and certainly to the Imagine Belfast Festival. It cannot get any better than launching a book in a festival called Imagine, but especially for Anything But Steady, given that reimagining is a pivotal plot in the book. So of course, only the matchless CEO of the Center for Democracy and Peace Building, and somebody I I have an amazing friend in Eva Grossman, deserves all the thanks for imagining, not only imagining me doing this in your festival, but also making this opportunity happen. So thank you, Eva. And I just want to say one last thing. It's very, very personally special for me here because my eldest is spending her semester in Copenhagen, but this enables her to take part in some of my celebrations. So hi, Cleely. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Eva. And thanks all the audience that has tuned in. Now to your question, what motivated me to write a novel? And I'm in hindsight, I would say that it actually started in my pre-academic life, and that what seeded the novel in me long before I actually knew what Northern Ireland would grow to mean for me. For an attorney, I was the equivalent of your barrister. Storytelling is second nature. Anticipating the other side's narrative is really helpful to win a case in court. So one becomes quite comfortable, I think, in conceiving stories in multiple ways. But my lawyerly storytelling mainly focused on persuasion, and that I found to be night and day from actually fiction writing. Now, the subsequent switch to academia opened new ways for my writing just by the mere fact that an academic, as you know, approaches information and data differently than a lawyer. Stories serve the goal of theory making. Data serves knowledge production. So it helps to make someone a more nuanced writer. Academic writing is much leaner, I would say, more edited, certainly less theatrical than the storytelling one does as a litigator. But about 7 years ago, I started a role at Harvard that brought me in closer contact with scholars in the humanities. And those conversations, I think, were really my springboard into fiction writing, or more correctly, writing faction with an A, because Anything But Steady is essentially fiction about facts. So I'd like to call it faction. Presumably the social relevance of literature won't be news to anyone in the audience, nor was it for me. But what I've learned from these conversations I held with people studying the humanities at Harvard, what I've learned from those conversations for my job was that many novelists preceded social theory. So people like Proust, like Tolstoy, like Hardy, James, Auden, inventing in their prose, inventing in their heads the social science that was proven afterwards. And that was an astonishing personal realization for me. I was actually quite blown away to see it over and over, or more precisely, to read it over and over in the books that I was exposed to as part of this new role of mine at Harvard. But that, of course, still earning this new understanding on the value of fiction doesn't make you run and write a novel, right? And here I think Northern Ireland had to intervene to emancipate my novelist's voice.
Thank you very much. It's actually interesting that when you were talking about that is the having been an academic for a very, very long time now, and being involved in the early peace process, and you know, I went into the prisons and did talks, etc., and all of that. And the number of times you're actually in really funny, amusing circumstances, or people who say things, or things that unfold, and of course you can't use it because you're there under the codes and the ethics of academia. And there's many a funny story or retort, or even just the people you meet have very different personalities than what you see in public. And of course, there's you know, that I think one of the ways maybe writing a novel frees you from all of that, and it gives you a way to, you know, really get into the human nature of what we write about, which, you know, because we have to publish and because we have to get through reviews, etc., we sort of dehumanize writing a little bit in academia. And that. Anyhow, now you're clearly not from here, as they would say in Northern Ireland. and you're not from around here, and there's an interesting question then. Why have you ended up writing a novel about this place, or why have you ended up being interested in this place? Because many people, if you remember Fortnite magazine, just lost its international subscriptions whenever the peace process came, whenever it was clear that much of what was problematic here had been solved. So I just wondered why you'd ended up thinking about this place or engaging with it.
So my interest obviously focused on divided societies. Oops, I think I lost you, but hopefully you can still see me. My interest focused on divided societies and conflict setting. That's my professional interest. And this is what led me to your work, Pete. That's how I got to know you. Of course, my accent and my name don't camouflage that I'm a product of another divided society, born and bred in Jerusalem, another divided city. I hope everything is okay, Alan. I can't.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was born and bred in Jerusalem, another divided city. But actually, my first encounter, Pete, with Northern Ireland was pretty random. I moved to the United States in 1998. So this was actually a turning of a page year for me, just as much as it was for peace in Northern Ireland. And I think it was back in 2011 or maybe 2010 that my eldest, then in grammar school, came home one day and said that she'll need to wear green tomorrow for the holiday. At that point, and now I'm green with embarrassment to disclose, but I will, I hadn't a clue which holiday she was talking about. And when I realized, I also understood that I live in the heart of Irish America, also quite the news to me at that point in time as well. We have never been to Ireland before, so that summer we took our first trip. And because I heard about the troubles and the peace, Belfast was on the itinerary. And clueless, we arrived on the morning of July 13th. And street scenes seem weirdly all too familiar for someone who was coming from a different conflict zone in their youth. The black taxi driver was a little startled when I said in my very Israeli accent that I'd like to go all over with these two little girls of mine, but particularly to where the Guildford Four came from, because the film In the Name of the Father was one of my favorites in law school. And of course, as soon as I saw those familiar Palestinian-Israeli flags flying high and proud, but in mutually exclusive Belfast settings, that transformed the family trip into my professional trip. And that's how I got to know Northern Ireland.
Very interesting that you say about, the parades and all of that, which every society has parades, but of course we have a very intense, not intense, I don't mean it that way, very, very powerful expression of identity and parades, especially within the Protestant orange culture. And there was a famous footballer called Jackie Milburn, who was in the 50s, was one of the most famous footballers in England. And before the days of millions of pounds being paid to players, you had to keep your career going. And he came over and played for a local team here called Linfield. And he was the manager of the club. This wouldn't happen now. Of course, a Premier League player wouldn't come and play part-time football. And he arrived on the 12th of July. And of course, there's 100,000 people. And there's 100,000 people marching and 200,000 people watching. And he thought it was for him. When he arrived in Belfast, he thought this big parade was to welcome him to Belfast. Little was he to find out it wasn't for him. But it is that thing I think very interesting that you probably have the same experiences as me. And I don't wish to stereotype conflict zones, but they do generate a different type of way of being. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I've always noticed when I've been in Iraq, Israel, Palestine, other such places is one's the humor as a coping mechanism. That's especially what we might call what you call black humor. I don't know what the politically correct term is now, but sort of that that type of humor I've always found everywhere. I've found a reaction to things, that people are more, the antennae is a bit more sensitive to things, and of course preoccupation with what is happening in your society, security, all of that. But one of the other things I've always really found is how very pleasant people can get very intense in their identity very, very quickly. And I wondered if you have those sorts of experiences, living in, you've obviously got the benefit of not living in a conflict zone, and you've had the benefit of living in a conflict zone and study. But have you ever noticed those things, that there's similarities in the character of people, or there's ways in which conflict shapes people that you mightn't get in Middle England, or parts of France or whatever else?
You're very kind to be, you're very kind in the way you describe that. I come from the Middle East, my friend. That there's no subtleties over there for anything. So that's obviously, but their similarities are definitely there. And one of the things that is pretty remarkable for comparativists like me to see is, usually when you're a student of comparisons, the soft belly for you as an academic is to prove that the comparison is valid, right? That's one of the things you need to do when you write academic work about comparisons. But it's remarkable to see, I totally agree with you, to see how many of these, in divided societies, how much of the similarity exists there. And that's part of my book as well, is telling that story of the similarities of
so we should talk about your book. The other thing I also find interesting, just on this, I think relates to your book as well, is in conflicts, how women become invisible. And sort of, if you think about Northern Ireland was the center of suffragism, okay, and was also a center of punk rock and all of this. So it has these other histories and cultures which get written out because the identity thing is much bigger. Anyhow, so let's hear about this novel. What's it about, and how has it come to be?
So I'll tell you about the novel, but of course my two narrators are women, female, so whatever, or identifying as females these days. That's how you probably say it in the more politically correct. But I'd definitely like to give you a short trailer, but without giving too much away, Pete. So we meet present day Northern Ireland, 100 years old, frustrated that her hard-fought peace left her in essentially reconciliation limbo. That's her frame of mind when she stumbles upon Ella Goldin, who is a PhD student from New York, focusing on peace building. Ella is fascinated by Northern Ireland, but as an American Jew without any local ties, she is not well versed in the Anglo-Irish relations. Northern Ireland isn't oblivious to Ella's limitations. Don't get me wrong, not at all. History has made Northern Ireland the realist for sure. But she already lost her 20th century spotlight at this point. She's 100 years old. So she decides, why not? Here is an ambitious American, enthusiastic over me. Let Ella have her chance to contemplate my destiny. And this twins the two of them together, binds Ella and Northern Ireland in a joint journey. Ella's investigation of the circumstances is understandably unsteady. Northern Ireland, as you know, is an unsolved, complicated place to figure out. And Ella tries to make sense of what exactly is happening around her. And with that, unknowingly, she brings to the surface things that concern Northern Ireland. So Ella's digging prompts Northern Ireland to react. Of course, you can understand that. It's hard to keep quiet when issues concerning one's legacy come about. It's harder when secrets emerge. And she shares the events and the details about herself, about her people, that I think are quite dramatic. I hope are quite dramatic, sometimes shocking. But of course, the book will take you, as we said, it tells a more universal story. So it takes readers beyond Northern Ireland, and they'll get to know an ensemble of characters associated with the other settings and all that ripples, of course, from that. But I feel like I should stop here and let the twists and turns come with the read.
It's interesting there. One of my memories of change in our society was actually the near disappearance of the Jewish community in Belfast, and which was quite significant at one time, and I think mostly came from what today would be Russia, Lithuania, that sort of area, and settled primarily on the Shankill Road originally, which is for those who are not from here, a very working class Protestant community. And actually, at the football team I support, there's still about 5 or 6 men now who are quite elderly who come to the games who are from those backgrounds. They should probably not be there on a Saturday, but they are there, and they add to the character of it. It was actually sort of strange that there's two forces there. One was, when you get to such a small size, it's hard to reproduce your community. And the other thing is, of course, many people packed up because of the Troubles, because many members of the Jewish community were retailers, and quarter of Belfast was flattened during the conflict. And, many people in that community packed up and went to Manchester, and Dublin and London. So it is, we actually had a Jewish mayor as well many years ago. So it became very much part of the fabric of our society. And, the consequences of conflict is we always think about the main groups in our society, but it did have consequences for smaller groups within our society as well. And of course, what conflict does is it destroys diversity. And that's the point of it. The point of conflict is to line people up behind beliefs and feelings and all else. So we're not giving away too much, but we know there'll be a book launch, and it'll come. We'll talk about that later on. So you've chosen this multiple first person narrator, and could you? I know you mentioned that a little bit, but would you like to tell us a bit more about why you chose that style of Joycean writing?
I'm going to tell you that, but you actually mentioned something that I want to mention to people in the audience. They may not know this, but Herzog, the first president, the first Herzog president, because our president, Israel's president right now is Herzog, his son, was born in West Belfast. Did you know that? And now his son is in the same role, and his ancestors are coming from West Belfast, which is pretty remarkable.
That community also produced many great playwrights and actors in the 50s and 60s. And there was one series that was a little short series was made about Belfast and about growing up Jewish in Belfast. And it's that famous line, which is a very cliched line, but it's a line nonetheless, where the author is recounting as a small boy when he stopped at an interface at an area between Catholics and Protestants. And they do the normal thing which happened to us when we were kids. Are you a Catholic or a Protestant? And he says, no, I'm a Jew. And they go, are you a Catholic Jew or a Protestant Jew? And so even if you weren't part of it, you still, and of course, many people in the Jewish community were actually fitted into unionism. And he writes very much about that in his work. Anyhow, sorry, I interrupted you when you were going to tell us about the narrative.
You didn't interrupt me because you told about the narrative right now without even knowing, but I'm keeping it this. Yes, but I'll explain the choice of the multiple person narrators. So I must confess and say that I think the multiple narrators format has chosen me, and I didn't choose it. And I'll explain why. And writers often say, not that I believed it initially, but writers often say that characters take a life of their own as stories are written. And I have found that actually to be true. So as a social scientist, I'm saying that it wasn't clear that that's true, but it was for me. Ella Goldin, the first narrator, the PhD student, is of course an organic choice. The only way to start a novel, given my own outsider background, was Ella. She's writing a PhD on peace building, and that task involves exploration, involves interpretation, conclusions, which was my dynamic with Northern Ireland. The place, as you know, is Mecca for peace builders, yet hovering tensions persist. So becoming hooked on a Northern Irish drama when one studies peace building is a given. And drama, as you know, is something Northern Ireland isn't short on, ever. So readers will see much of the typical academic in Ella. She's constantly analyzing, but she's also a romantic, I think, and she has a healthy sense of humor. But one of her novelties, I think, is that she's occupied with contemporary Northern Ireland. This isn't a historical fiction on the Troubles. The book is not a historical fiction on the Troubles. And accordingly, Ella's story is told in the present tense. So the reader is with her in thick and thin, unmediated, together with Ella in her experiences, sharing her unspoken thoughts, many observations because she has a racing mind. So that is the experience with Ella. And by the way, in retrospect, thank goodness for that choice, because can you imagine launching a book about the Troubles when Sir Kenneth Branagh might be getting his Oscar for that tonight? Not for my nerves. So it's really healthy that Ella focused on present-day Northern Ireland when we're launching. But Northern Ireland, as a first-person narrator, was more gradual to me than Ella. As in divided societies, you know this really well, a mirror image of reality is a given. It's always there. And that's that character of a central character of divided societies. So the more I got to know Northern Ireland, the more I fantasized about asking her, how is she feeling about these two competing visions and versions inside her? And this curiosity was building inside me for a while until I essentially turned into her ghostwriter. That's what I was. And I don't want to spoil surprises in the book, but I'll give you a tiny, tiny example of that. So one of the first things that an outsider notices when talking to people from Northern Ireland is the polarizing power of the name Northern Ireland. And people with different views refer to her differently. So at one point in the book, something sparks Northern Ireland to open up about this complex relationship with her given name. And she shares something that I hope I keep a surprise. I hope I will surprise the readers.
So those characters, do they come to consume you? Do they become sort of like less imagined and more like semi-physical? Or are they around you? Are they in your? Are they everywhere? You get up in the morning, you think what they would think. You become some sort of out of body experience, sort of thing.
It's not even an out of body experience. I don't know if you saw the film about John Nash. And one of the things, A Beautiful Mind, there used to be and he had the characters, because for his illness, he had the characters walking with him. And as a physicist, he explained that he understood how to get over his illness, his mental illness, by understanding that they're not growing up. They're not getting older with him. And suddenly he understood that those who don't get older are really imaginary. They're with you all the time. You think through them all the time. And it's an immense pleasure I highly recommend to everybody, but definitely to a social scientist. It's a completely different experience. But I was actually really, COVID was horrible for everybody. It was horrible for everybody all over the world. But the 2 years of the COVID, when I was mainly in my house, but I was able on a Word document to travel to all the places I missed, that was remarkable.
It sounds like a very liberating experience. And I suppose you didn't want to give away too much, but it seems to me that one of the themes you probably picked up on is for a younger generation, which hasn't gone through the conflict in the way that my generation did, there's always that point about, is it time to forget? Is it time to move on? Is it time to, and of course, I think many of us do feel that, but of course, the problem with conflict is that something can stimulate a memory that maybe, you can wake up in the morning, let's all move on, let's create a better society. And then somebody says one little thing, and we're all human. And I think that whole process of transforming conflicts is it, with the benefit of a novel is, of course, it's at the individual level. That the person you're actually not challenging is what's around you, or the power that's around you, or the abuses that are around you. It's actually challenging yourself, and especially if you've lived through conflict and seen death and killings and shootings and gone to the funerals, etc. It's an interesting thing. As academics, we would write that in sort of very theoretical ways, whereas what you've probably done in this novel is written that in a personal way. It's the tension between generations. About, if things have improved, then why is this so important to you older people? Because we lived it, anyhow. So you have a wonderful book, you have a wonderful cover, and you have a wonderful title. So can you tell us a little bit about your choices for around those?
Yes, I'd love to. So not only Ella, but all the main characters in the book experience a journey that is anything but steady. Anything but steady, the book's title. Ella herself goes through quite a lot in the novel, in her personal life for sure, but also in the process of working through her PhD. And of course, uncertainty is the defining feature of Northern Ireland since its inception 100 years ago. So where are we heading? What are we doing? So that's how I chose the title, Anything But Steady. But the cover too, and maybe we should do the big reveal, Alan, right now, because some people have just ordered, it just came out. All right, so this is my cover. And Pete, do you recognize the bridge?
It's a Carrick-na-Reid rope bridge, yeah.
Of course it is. So I think the cover too speaks to the central theme of Anything But Steady as well. Of course, as Pete immediately recognized, I'm sure all of the locals in the audience would recognize the spectacular, amazing bridge to walk on, a rope bridge. But even if someone is not from Northern Ireland, they would know that walking on a rope bridge, one feels anything but steady. And the metaphor of unsteadiness is also central to Judaism. Being a fiddler on the roof, I'm sure people know about that musical, or many people know about that musical. That's not the most steady of positions, is it? But there's also a very Jewish metaphor about a bridge. And I'll let Ella tell that to the readers. I'm not going to disclose that. But the idea of unsteadiness isn't just reflecting the characters' stories. It is also speaking to the central exploration of the novel. In a state of unsteadiness, one needs to think on one's feet, to contemplate alternatives. Extraordinary often becomes the ordinary, sometimes leading to choose the originally unimaginable. So uncertainty breeds possibilities, breeds opportunities, and oftentimes places imagination at its best. At her lower point in the book, Ella says to herself, your crisis as an event matured into a crisis as a process. Embrace it if you want to find a solution for this situation. And when a very big secret emerges, Northern Ireland cuts in, apologizing for intrusion, of course, because she's Northern Ireland, she must apologize. But she apologizes for the intrusion, but she explains that although she wasn't planning to butt in, her greatest fear materialized to the point that she's changing course. So this liberating dimension in unsteadiness was something I was striving to engage with in the novel, and that determined the title, but also the cover.
Very good.
Alan, I think we can stop sharing. I can see Pete again. Yeah.
I will tell any of you, if you ever come to this place and you don't like heights, that is not a bridge you want to walk across. It doesn't bother me, but I've seen people freeze on it. It was actually a bridge that it's between an island and the mainland, and the fishermen used to use it to get access to a better point because the area is cliffs, and they used the bridge to get to this island, which allowed you access to the sea. And it's not for the faint-hearted, but your novel is.
It's amazing.
But your novel is for everybody, and of course it's important. Books are important, and the Belfast Book Festival, which is a joint sponsor of this, it's critically important. And you'll know Belfast. We have that wonderful bookshop, No Alibis, in Botanic Avenue, and as book sales were plummeting and independent bookshops were going by the by. David and his friends set up this spectacular little bookshop, which has gone from strength to strength. And there's one thing that's actually really interesting. There was a guide last year in the Sunday Times, and the only books which have maintained their readership and sales since the 1980s are books about Ireland and Irish history. So hopefully your book will sell well in that market and all else. So obviously, if you write a book, it's clear that you think there's something you want to tell, or there's something that's very important. So what was that point? What was the thing you thought that was really important that you had to get out of yourself and you had to get down on paper?
So it actually draws on something we already started to discuss at the beginning, the fact that divided societies embody this complexity and contradictions, but they are often one and the same in their challenges. So firstly, I wanted to tell that universal story of the long-term damage after political violence, the intergenerational trauma that you've already alluded to and you've done so much work on, and the challenges around repairing relations because differences stay after the fighting is over. And one of the main characters in the book tells Ella, he says to her, he's Northern Irish, and he says to her, "We are remembrance specialists. Around here, history isn't only a school subject, it's one's inheritance." He tells her that. But there was a second reason beyond the legacy of political violence that fueled anything but steady in me. Many conversations that I had around Northern Ireland often sounded the same melody. Frustration, you talked about the new generation, but frustration that society is ahead of the politicians, but that the abnormal politics in Northern Ireland was created by the peace arrangements, by the institutions mandated by the peace accord. So the tribal politics that continues to today in the assembly is possible because of the peace accord structures, while most people actually worry about other things. That's something I often heard when I talked to people from Northern Ireland. And what I felt was missing in these conversations is what social science identified as the potential for change through agency of human action, even when people live in constraining systems. Okay, so we know that from social science, that people have an agency even in constraining systems. But reading social science isn't always a page turner. Not you, yours is, but other people, it's not always a page turner. And because I'm a closeted activist, I wanted to craft a narrative that would allow to think about seemingly immovable constraints as movable. And I think being a teacher in a university teaches you that. I have learned that one's need to create the desire to be taught for my teaching to be effective. And that's Immanuel Kant, by the way. I'm standing on his shoulder. It's not me, the desire to be taught. So writing this novel is first and foremost a love letter to a place that has become indispensable to my own thinking. But because I found your place to be as fascinating as it is generous, with people, or at least most people, saying that they want to move forward. I wrote the book with the intention to illuminate scholarship around forward movement, but without having to read it the academic way. So one reads a novel, a prose that allows to think about agency, the power of people to change, without being a dense scholarship. But I do want to ask you, Pete, because you are really the expert on these things. So may I ask you one question too? What are your thoughts about the direction of Northern Ireland? Where are we heading? We have elections coming up. So where are we heading with this?
I think it's all an answer like that always has to sort of is not so much where we're heading, but where we've come from. So, it's 1972 in this society, there were 10,000 shooting incidents, nearly 500 people killed. There was the police seized 20,000 kilograms of explosives, and today, virtually nobody's being killed. The police are seizing around 0.5 kilogram of explosives, and there's nothing even close to 10,000 shootings a year. So I think, as you've already alluded to, peace doesn't necessarily bring stability in some ways, because clearly, as with Israel, it's a contested place, and of course, there's a significant section of people within this society who wish Northern Ireland not to be, the point you made about the power of the name, who wish for it not to be part of the UK. I think one of the things that, as much as we have witnessed that, that big heavy lifting in the 90s to, people who, Sinn Féin said they would never sit in a devolved parliament. They're sitting in a devolved parliament. Unionists would have been less concerned about equality or maybe fair employment or all of those things that they then signed up to create devolution. But I think that what happened was we got this very discordant assembly in which that sort of high level identity politics remained very much at the fore. And I actually do believe that society went off and created its own peace process in many ways, and which is why, you know, a quarter of people are now in mixed relationships. It's why people work together. It's why people share together. It's why people invest together. It's why people reconcile together. So I think there's two things in that. I think one, people don't recognize that this is a very transformed society. You'll see our media is very, I'm sure it's the same where in Israel, the media is very driven by the negative. So even today, there's been a threat against Irish politicians. You know, that's something, of course, we take seriously, but you'd very rarely see stories like reconciliation's working well or violence is down. So that's one part of it. And I don't think our political class can own it. I don't think they can own these changes. I think, one, because for those who wish for a united Ireland, if you own those changes, which are really profound changes and will take us somewhere we don't know where it will take us, it means Northern Ireland is working and in a certain way. And therefore, why would you need a united Ireland? So that's a challenge for those people, even though they helped create this peace process. And then, of course, for unionists, you know, if things are positive, then, you know, there's no thing to reject or push back or keep at bay or all of that. So I think society's moving on. I think in these elections, we're doing surveys and polls at the minute. We have a sort of, I hate using the word centre ground, but I can't think of another word. We have the Alliance Party and the Green Party, and it seems that for the first time in our surveys, they're going to capture about a fifth of the vote, and this hasn't happened before. They got about 11% combined in 2017, our last Assembly election, and they're sitting now around 22%. So something's changing electorally, and also, of course, as you know, in other societies, younger people don't really want to vote for constitutional parties, and most certainly my experience of my own kids is they are very respectful to the past, and they you know, members of our family were harmed, etc., and they know all of that, but they don't know why it's such a fixation whenever they're trying to build a career, get a home, start a family, and very much, you know, we've gone somewhere else, but not really accounted for or accepted where it is. So that would really be my response regarding that. And I can see with some questions coming in. So if you want me to go on and on and on, because I'm from here, so I will talk all day if you want. We have a culture of talking and talking and talking. I'm happy to keep talking, or we can go to the last question and then start getting into the questions from the audience. So I'll let you decide what way you want to proceed.
So you ask me one more question, and then we'll let the audience. And you can jump in anytime. I mean, with your accent, you can talk all night, as far as I'm concerned.
It's thank you very much. I think one of the things that's really important is what you already talked about before, which I think academia writes people out, and I'm a human geographer, and I sometimes wonder when I read academic articles, where are the humans? And it's that process in which we theorize and analyze, and I think there's something really quite difficult in that, where you get further and further away from the people who are the body of what you're really talking about in academia. But clearly, I'd assume that one of the hopes or goals of your book was to not only what we already sort of talked about, to go into a different sort of form for expressing your ideas and your beliefs, but also we all have an ego. It gets out of bed in the morning. I think ego is a good thing, as obviously it's not, as long as it doesn't become excessive. Okay, but obviously we do things because we hope people will read them. We hope people would engage. We hope people will learn from it. So if you could maybe just sum up a few of the things you really hope for with your novel.
Yes, and I'll sum it up maybe with every part of me, okay, that has become. So the first would be my new and very excited novelist would immediately jump and say that the first and foremost thing that I hope for is that the characters, the book will touch the readers, and that the read would be enjoyable and would be memorable. So that's the novelist voice in me jumps first. But then the academic in me would add that I wrote the book as a conversation starter, that the novel intends to concretize ideas about reconciliation and make them easier to think about, which then brings my third person to jump in, and that is the fan of Northern Ireland in me. And I do like to share that I'm planning to hop over in May. So yes, true, in all honesty, thanks to your surveys, I'm on the edge of my seat about the upcoming elections. And Ella would kill me. Ella, you asked me about if they're part of my life. They're part of my life constantly. So she would kill me if I'm not there during elections. But post-elections, as the fog subsides, on the 10th of May, we plan to launch the book in person at the University of Ulster. And hopefully maybe have the books in No Alibi. Now you've given me an idea to do it there. I know the store in South Belfast, it's amazing. So maybe that's a great place too. So this is the invitation for my in-person book launch. And Alan, we also have, maybe you can put in the chat the register. You have to register so you'll get all the details. But it would be wonderful if people in the audience would come and join us there on May 10th. But anyone who wants to start the conversation with me earlier, the book is already online in Amazon, on Amazon.com or .co, the UK or whatever that is in your side of the pond, and in other online stores. I know my name is really hard, but my personal email is very easy. So it's my first name, just spell it correctly, my last name, ofrit.liviatan@gmail.com. Feel free. I really look forward to hearing from everybody about that. So definitely. Right. And please join us.
So you and I are great chatters, but there are other people who want to ask us creative things as well. We have an audience who we respect very much. So we have a Cormac. I'll read out the question. Sorry, we don't have that. Well, I wouldn't have the technical capacity to go to people and get them to ask their questions. So I will do my best to ask your question as you have written it. So Cormac, who loves my Seamus Heaney painting in the back, you can come sometime, Cormac, and have a look at it. It's actually parts of Seamus Heaney poems cut out and then bleached to give the effect of a human face with shadow and light, etc. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. He sold plenty of books. We're trying to get you to sell these books. So one of the things, of course, is what Cormac's interested in is about this question we've sort of looked at already. How did writing about Northern Ireland for fiction rather than scholarship change your perspective of this place? So you'd studied this place as an academic, and then you were.
Ask you: Is Cormac has Cormac used his last name?
Savage.
From
a Norman background.
My good friend, who is a first year at Harvard University. Did you know that? Do you know him?
I do not know him. No.
If you don't, you need to know the guy.
I will get to know Cormac.
So hi, Cormac. Good to see you. Yes, so he's actually from Northern Ireland. It's pretty amazing, and every time I hear that, that's like magic dust for me, right? How did it change me? It didn't stop changing me. This is the thing. It has shown me. I said that in the beginning that I've started conceiving multiple ways of seeing things earlier in my career, but that really, I think, crystallized for me how much the way you see things is never another, never another's or all the others. And it made me a much more, I think, a humble person, I hope humble person, but also a little more empathic to other things. And I hope it keeps changing me. Anything but steady, right? That's the novel. I feel that nothing stopped. It's a continuing process, but it's a process that I love.
It's always that interesting thing about being the point I made earlier on, but just so many people you meet personally and in reconciliation projects, and they're just so different to the person you see in the television screen or you see in the public meeting. It's that public-private struggle that many people have. Okay. Lauren Hines has asked, are there any characters from the novel you'd like to go back to? And if so, would they be part of a future novel?
Well, thank you for that question. So So this is another thing that I've learned, maybe through this process, but generally in life, is that you never say never on something. So at this point, I'm not sure that I have that I'm going to go back to any of them, but that time will tell. That is what I've learned. Time will tell. So yeah.
Okay. So Omri, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Omri, Omri. And Jared, I can pronounce that. Both of them have asked a similar question. What did you enjoy about this as a writing process?
So I would say, you know, I've already said at the beginning that to convey an atmosphere, to convey emotions, to all the dimension of prose that are very new to social scientists, like you've said, you've also commented on, it forces you to move out of yourself. And that's an immense privilege and an amazing pleasure. And as I said, I think at the beginning, during the pandemic, it was actually life healing as well. So I think this whole process is very, very different, and doing different things changes you as a person, and doing different things is new experiences. And there's nothing, I think, like new experiences, especially as you get older.
One of the things actually, well, not that I write novels or would be able to write a novel, but I must say, whenever I'm just sitting here writing academic pieces or blogs, whatever, it's the one part of my life which is actually the most, I was going to say selfish, but that's not that it's selfish. It's just that you're so locked away from everything. I don't hear things. I don't think about things when I'm writing it. You know, we'll have issues in life, things that have gone wrong or whatever else. But it's the actual one thing, like contemplation and silence. It's the thing I love about it, is silence. And then, you know, that way in which you think you've been doing it for half an hour, and then you realize you've been doing it for about 10 hours. And you get caught up in something, isn't it? Writing is a sort of an internal release. Anyway, we have a very important question from Adrian Manov, so we've asked the question about the one way, so we're going to ask the question the other way. How does writing a fiction actually affect you as a social scientist? So we've talked about social scientist becomes author. So how does that, so all processes run to and fro?
Well, I'll answer Adrian, but I actually want to say two people I want to say hi to in the end. So Siobhan was my editor. And to make people Northern Irish, of course, as you know, it's been a remarkable experience working with her as an editor. So Adrian, I'm beginning to answer you how it changed me. It's a very different process to write fiction, and it's a very different process to work with editors who work on. So Siobhan, can you say hi so people will see you? All right. Now the other person is not called Nathan Ryder. Her name is Susie Ryder, and she's actually from England. Susie, can you say hi? Say hi so people will see your, be a speaker for a second. Can you do that?
Oh, hang on a second.
Okay. So these are people that have been immensely helpful for me. Susie, can we see you? Hi, Shiva. All right. So eternally grateful to my editors here that have joined the talk. It's amazing to see you, and I'll hope to see you soon. Definitely seeing you, Siobhan, in May, and we'll see, Susie, how we can do that. Yeah. But to Adrian, so I said that, you know, the whole process changed me. The fact that I understood that social science was invented in novelists' head was astounding. That was what started everything for me. And I think now when I read social science, I'm a much more critical social scientist, but not in methodology, not in you know, when you go to conferences, you know how it is. You talk about the methodology, the comparative perspective, these things. I think about the human story, and that is where I think this is where my critical eye became much stronger. Based on what Pete was saying, we are humans loving stories, so that's what we do. And even in academia, we use the story, the data, to support our conclusions. So I think I've become a better social scientist with the human story part.
Actually, it just strikes me, because you brought up your two wonderful editors, and as academics, we're actually involved. Our career is to write, and that's how we build our career, etc. I never meet any editors because you send something in electronically, and then you get the please don't send anything back again. This is terrible. Or you get the you need to make a few revisions, and and reviewers read your work and all of this here. But you never meet these people because the reviewers are anonymous, and the editor's just somebody on an editorial board. And it is funny there when you know that clearly one of the things by writing a novel is you actually get to know people who help. They're actually part of a process which is visible to you, as well as opposed to the process we're in, where somebody's just at the other end of an email. And if they like your work, you're very courteous and thank you very much. And if you don't like your work, you're very courteous and say, okay, I'll try something else. But there's no relationship. It's the way in which that's become so alienating in a way from other.
And I must say, it's such a different process because they become your best friends. I mean, Siobhan and Susie, where they were with me in all of it. They know everybody like me, and they care. They come to care about them, or that's how it seemed to me. And they really came to care about them in that way. And to read those comments, you don't get a comment of, okay, change this word or do this, that. As you get funny comments, you laugh, you cry with their comments. It's a very, very different process, and it's something that you must do, Pete. You must do it.
I shall see if I get time. So Susie, who we've just met, also, so you obviously don't want to give away too much about the novel, but she's pointing out that Ella is a very funny, tenacious, and self-deprecating person. Is that you? Is that your personality? Would you say, because I assume you write yourself into these things. We all write ourselves into things. Is it really funny when you know somebody and you're reading their academic work or reading a novel or their poetry and you know them, you can hear their voice? Is it really strange? Like students, even when you mark a student's essay, you can hear their voice. Now, I don't know why that is, but it is something that I'm always very, very aware of. If you know the person, you hear a voice.
Absolutely.
So anyway, and then we have one more question after this.
But I do want to say something about this because I am not Ella at all. So to a degree, sure, everything in the book draws on my own experiences. It does. And some are quite obvious, like writing a PhD, being a mom, living in places featured in the book. But the book is as far from a memoir as anything can be. So yes, the small experiences are there. By the way, so are the experiences of the people who appear in the acknowledgement, and we are yet to see if they're thankful for that. You don't know that until you hear from them. But I could also say my Irish handyman in Massachusetts is responsible for a few good details in the book, because when Ella comes to, when Ella makes those comparisons in houses, in things that she's seeing, he is in charge of these details in the book. But the larger themes of this book, at least, belong to Anything Was Steady. It's not me, and I'm not any of those characters. But you hear them all the time, and this is why I'm not doing a reading, because I'm not going to ruin the Northern Irish. Now everybody heard you, and now they can imagine how the Northern Irish speak. But maybe in May, I'll nudge someone to do the read in the right accent.
We have a very distinct accent, and coming here and conquering, especially when we talk on our local idioms and patterns, it's a challenge in itself, and it's that thing about we just talk so quickly with a sort of mumble, and but anyway, we do our best. So the book's also on Kindle, people, as well. There's another way in which you can find it. Now, I'm going to have a stab at this name. I'm going to spell it to you. I'm going to have a stab at it, and you're going to correct me. Yael, Yael?
Yes.
How do I pronounce it? Yael?
Yael, and she's my mom.
Oh, hello, Mom. It's Mother's Day. I don't know if it's Mother's Day.
I mean, it could be another Yael, but Yael is my mom.
Okay. It's Mother's Day here, so hello to all the mothers. And I hope you've all been rewarded and thanked for all the things you do. So your mother asked the most difficult question for you because she's your mother, and your mother has to keep you in your place, and that's her job. And as we know, your children never grow up; they're always your little babies, and something that's terrible socially, but we always treat them. It's just the way we are. It's nature. Right. So anyway, you've written this book. You've been here. You've lived in Northern Ireland. You've looked at, your mother calls it the North of Ireland, going back to the issue about different names, etc. And I can't think of anywhere else that has so many names. Northern Ireland, North Ulster, 6 counties, etc. So, final question then, an easy question. Do you have any insights on the Israeli-Palestine conflict now that you've done all of this work and written this novel?
Well, so I'm gonna answer it with a trailer. Read anything but steady. That's what I think about the. I think I'm answering that there.
Okay. Well, it was a delight, and I'm sure you're tired now because you've been responding to all of these questions and telling us very much about your wonderful novel, Anything But Steady. And of course, you're always welcome in Northern Ireland. It's important that people come and see the place and offer us insights that we might miss or might forget about the place. And I think your energy about, you've picked up the way in which this place has changed, but I assume also picked up that, people haven't really recognized that change. And you've tried to contemplate that, and you've tried to develop that as a way of thinking about the place. And sometimes we need people from outside. It's the I remember once and when I first lived in Liverpool, and I brought some what are known as Scousers over to Belfast. We came out of City Airport, Belfast, and of course, one of the ways to solve our conflict was a massive housing program in the 70s and 80s, and we were driving past what we call a council estate or a social housing estate. And one of the Scousers tapped me in the back and went, "Is that where the yuppies live?" So working class Scouser comes to Belfast, where there's been this building of a much homes fit for people, and assumes automatically it's a private housing estate, and it's things like that. When somebody says that, and you go, "Yeah, that's not like housing estates in parts of England, which are really poor and deprived and lack all of that." So it's really good. And of course, big thank you to Alan and to the festival and the book festival, and also your good friend Eva. I can see why you're friends. You've both got so much energy.
Oh,
And
there's no one like that.
I'm actually going to come sometime and have lunch with you because I want to see who gets a word in edgeways. Because I talk a lot, you talk a lot, Eva talks a lot, but I want to come along and see who wins that battle. And of course, that's a sign of having things to say, and I think that's really important, and having a passion for change, and all else. So I'll let you come back in a little second. But so there's still a few things in Imagine Belfast that are on tonight. And of course, the Belfast Book Festival is on the 10th to 19th of June. And a big thank you to Peter O'Neill and people like Alan, because they've brought a lot of light into our society. And they've shown that there are cultural processes which aren't just the same old weary tropes. And they've freed up people to express themselves in ways which is the sign of a peace process when you can talk about other things and write about other things and do other things and think about things in a different way. And I think all of that's important because for many years in Belfast, there was no nightlife. There was no culture. The city centre was closed at night time. That's why if you go to the city centre, there's very few bars because it was closed during the 70s and 80s at night time. So very much it's your spirit and generosity as part of that process of how our society has changed. And everybody's invited to your book launch. So hopefully they'll come along and enjoy that. So anyway, you can now have the last say and finish off the event in whatever way you wish.
So the last say is just thank you. Thank you, Pete. It's been amazing. I could not have chosen better. And of course I didn't because Eva chose everything. And she's been an immense friend that anyone should have if they don't already. And I'm so grateful to you and the festival. And I look forward to seeing you in May and sitting next to you while you are explaining to me what's happening in the election. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay.
So thank you very much, everybody. And it's brilliant that you turned up. The messages here are all congratulations and thanks. And isn't it wonderful just spent an hour and a bit being so positive about life? And all of that's critically important to how we evolve and move on as a people and as a society. So thanks to everybody. We're getting a bit too thanky, but it is important. And thank you very much for giving up your time and coming to hear us natter and chat and get on the way we do. So thank you very much and good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.